of the major unions in the country, the Public Servants Association, has now said publicly it believes President Cyril Ramaphosa should not sign the NHI Bill into law. The union says it doesn't believe the bill has been properly costed. Some officials have said some forms of tax would have to increase to pay for it. In February, 2 months ago now, President Cyril Ramaphosa said in Parliament he was ready to sign the bill. He just has to find his pen. Reuben Maleka is the Assistant General Manager at the Public Servants Association. Reuben, good afternoon to you. I was almost a little surprised, if I may say, to see this. Why do you not want the NHI to be signed into law?
Good afternoon, LG. Good afternoon to the viewers. First of all, let me also state that health is a fundamental right. We believe that each and every citizen or everybody in the country must have a right to health care. But however, we are at a stage where we believe that the NHI Bill, being the one that would bring about that fundamental right to be realized, was not well consulted. Firstly, there has not been clarity about the funding of the NHI Bill or an implementation of the NHI, and we are afraid that if it's not been clarified, we will find ourselves again going back to the issue of increased, VAT possibly, and also the income tax. Many would agree with us to say currently in the state of the economy, many workers in the country are really feeling the burden in terms of tax, and further increase on income tax would exacerbate the current conditions, and we don't believe that is the right moment to increase any income tax or even VAT. So the other factor that also made us to believe that this NHI bill should not be signed into law is the issue of saying we don't believe also that the current state of hospitals in the country are ready to take on and implement NHI, given also the capacity of the health workers that are lacking. As we are just being aware, currently just happened in Pietermaritzburg where doctors were on strike demanding to be employed. So that tells you that we don't have enough capacity of health workers. We don't have sufficient, adequate hospitals with the private sector, and we don't.
All right, we seem to have lost Reuben Maleka there. Sorry about that. Let's see if we're able to just get him back and try and continue that conversation, because there's a lot to say, of course, around the NHI at the moment. Other news now, and the chair of the Community Policing Forum in Harare in Khayelitsha says she was shocked at the killing of 8 people in the area yesterday. She says people living in that area are scared to speak up about crime, fearing that they could also be targeted. She spoke to Yazid Kamaldeen at the spot where 3 of the 8 bodies were found yesterday.
I'm standing on the spot where 3 of the 8 persons were found killed in Harare, Khayelitsha yesterday. I'm now going to be speaking to the chairperson of the Community Police Forum in the area. What's important to understand from the get-go is that 8 persons were killed in Khayelitsha. What is the community's concerns about this?
Yeah, it's really, really frustrating. I mean, to see that people that are not supposed to have guns, they can have so easy to have an access to, to guns, and it really put a lot of fear to people. If people can be easily 8 of them to be killed, then you don't know what's going to happen next.
Now, I've interviewed the ward councillor, and his office is right opposite the shack where 4 of the bodies were found. And just about a kilometer, not less than a kilometer from that shack, another body was found. What do you make of this?
Yeah, there's a lot of movement that's happening in that area. So maybe people they didn't take it as serious that something like that can happen. But my worry is that when I was there to hear from the community around, that the people, they know these guys, and they are always have no goods in the community, and then it's worries how can really you let that thing happen. So I think that's my frustration. Maybe sometimes people don't trust to report these things, and the fear is that if you let that happen, which means anything can happen to your family just because you
All right, an important conversation there on the situation in Khayelitsha, in the Harare informal settlement. Back now to Reuben Maleka, the Assistant General Manager of the Public Servants Association. Reuben, sorry about that. We're talking, of course, about the NHI. You say the President shouldn't sign it into law. You're a union. Unions normally represent the working class. Other union movements, COSATU, they want it to be signed. I think FEDUSA does not. Won't the NHI help working people? Shouldn't you support it on that basis?
Yes, of course. Like I'm saying that the issue of NHI is a universal and fundamental right that everybody must have. However, there should be clarities of how it will be funded. Secondly, we are currently sitting with a resolution of PSBC of 2006 where we have established what is called Government Employee Medical Aid Scheme, so which is GEMS. It's a big medical scheme that is widely used by public servants. The question that we also want to ask, and there's a clarity that is not being made out there in the NHI Bill, is that whether government will continue subsidizing public servants, equally that they will be able to continue with GEMS along the NHI. Because without that clarity, one is not able to say what will be the status of public servants. Because we represent public servants, we would want to know whether government would be taking away the subsidy that is given to public servants in order to subsidize the NHI. And secondly, SG, is that we don't want to see at the end of the time where the intention is good, but we end up with NHI similar to be a monopoly like ESCOM, where the private sector is diminished. We are sitting with one sector, which is the public sector, through NHI, and when it collapses, we've got no alternative. And that is the fear that needs to be clarified.
I have to ask, so we've known about this bill for quite a long time. It's only now that you seem to be making this request of the President. Have you been speaking up against it before?
Obviously, the PSA, we have even made a written representation on the NHI. We have, the past more than 5 years, been engaging. We have been attending seminars where this particular discussion has been taking place. We have been asking the same questions that we're asking today, to say, even if we support the NHI in implementation, we cannot, on its form as the current bill, believe that it will address the fears that people have. Because we do not believe that NHI is introduced to do away with the private sector. And therefore, we need also clarity of saying what happens to medical aid such as GEMS. Because members who are pensioners, who are current members, would like to know what is their future. Is their future meaning that in the next phase of their life, whether on pension, they will have to rely on government hospitals? And if government hospitals rely on currently and going forward, would we have adequate public sector service? We're sitting with a situation where most of the hospitals and clinics do not have adequate number of resources in terms of numbers of public health officials. And also, we do not see that at this point in time, like example, in Pietermaritzburg, we just saw that doctors went on strike, unemployed doctors, because there's no adequate fund to fund doctors to be employed. Would the public service have that capacity to employ enough health professionals in order to match the implementation of NHI? And that clarity has not been provided.
Reuben, the President hasn't signed it into law. 2 months ago, he told us that he was going to sign it into law. I mean, can he not find his pen or something? Do you know why he hasn't signed it?
Look, we heard that he was looking for a pen, and we are skeptical to hear that maybe he got a pen and start signing that particular bill. And like I've said, we are not opposed to the NHI in entirety. We're simply saying that it needs to be refined. It needs to be clarified. It needs to be refined so that there are no consequences. As I give an example, saying that we don't want a monopoly of one sector, particularly on a fundamental right. So we don't want to see again where we have a similar situation, if I can give like the example of ESCOM, where you don't have alternative, you've got one provider, and if that provider collapses, everything collapses. And that is our fear.
Reuben Maleka, thank you. Assistant General Manager at the Public Servants Association. Really appreciate the time. In a moment.